all for being here. Hope you've had an opportunity to enjoy this lovely day and the lovely days that preceded it. Great break from the warmer weather this summer. I'm going to change the order of the agenda, and I'm also will announce later during the chair's remarks a change in the agenda as well. But at this time, I'd like to introduce Joshua Hutton, who is a principal with PRM Consulting. The item for his presentation is under old business, the first bullet. And let me see whether Mayor White, who is the chair of the Personnel Committee, who's the chair of the Personnel Committee, would like to make any other comments. Before she does, let me say that Mr. Hutton, if you could limit your remarks to 10 minutes, and then I'll allow for questions from the council members. And I also want to let everybody who's here know that this is a summary of a much longer report, and the report itself, which was presented earlier in or last month to the Personnel Committee, is going again to the Personnel Committee, which will consider the content and recommendations that were in the report. So they will come back to the council at a later date after the Personnel Committee processes them. Mayor White, anything?
Thank you. I wanted to add that this is a very comprehensive study that Mr. Hutton and his firm conducted. It was approximately $25,000, and he examined not only staff salaries but also their benefits. And so it's really important for the village to hear more about this study from him and to know that we will be discussing it as a council at a future meeting, possibly in October. Thank you.
Mr. Hutton, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much for having me.
If you'll talk directly into the microphone, it looks like it is on. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Joshua Hutton. I'm a principal with PRM Consulting Group, and we were retained by the Village of Friendship Heights to conduct a compensation study which involved a deep review of their 12 village employees who are assigned to 9 distinct position titles. And of the report that we prepared for the village, I'm walking through the background and the executive summary of it. If you do have it, you can refer to it from that standpoint. The review included going through a deep review of job duties and responsibilities, taking a further evaluation of Fair Labor Standards Act to see if positions are in compliance with that. We also wanted to review the positions from a market pay standpoint, where we looked at base salary particularly and any other variable pay components offered to village employees from their peer group competitors. And so there were a number of peers that were deemed as the market that we evaluated the village's positions against. And so from that market data, we were able to then create a salary structure for the village. It's something that the village currently does not operate from. And that salary structure consisted of 6 salary grades, and which was developed from the market data from the peer competitors evaluated. Those peer competitors, most common in the local county government industry, is the focus on the market median of that data. The market median of that data is also referred to as the 50th percentile. And so looking at that market data from those peer organizations, we were able to comprise a salary structure and evaluate those 12 positions to determine their external worth and how to comprise salary grades comparable to where the pay should be set for those roles. And then we also evaluated them internally, which related to taking a deeper dive in their compensable factors relative to their supervisory authority, what their responsibilities are relative to the village, and the roles that they play within the organizational structure of the village. From that, we are moving into the executive summary of the report. That's kind of high-level background around what we did and why we were retained. But as we got further into the report, I mentioned the peer group. We also evaluated that against salary and also employee benefits to take a deeper dive into the employee benefits offered by the village today. That includes retirement and also health care, dental, vision. And so those things were looked at from a total rewards perspective as it relates to your benefits package. Back to the salary structure. The salary structure was developed, again, it's consisting of 6 grades, and it was to be put into effect July 1st, and it extends for the duration of the fiscal year. It's something to be looked at on an annual basis amongst your competitors to see if it is to remain its competitiveness and if it needs to be adjusted. When we looked at the 12 employees of the village and they were slotted into the 6 salary grades, we wanted to evaluate their comp ratio, which means we're looking at their current base salary compared to the salary range midpoints, which is deemed as the current market, to determine whether or not their pay is competitive or below competitiveness, and whether or not recommendations need to be made around their base salaries. As things were set at the beginning of the salary structure, in aggregate, all employees are at 90.3% of the market. Now this is, again, looking at their current base salaries compared to the salary range midpoints. And that gave us a starting point of where you are relative to your pay and the salary structure created for the village's employees. From there, we needed to evaluate if any employees were below those new recommended minimums, and if we needed to administer any internal pay equity adjustments, which we also refer to as within grade analysis adjustments for pay for incumbents to determine whether or not their current pay is commensurate with their experience and background. So we've also administered some adjustments and recommendations for that, along with those who did not meet the minimums of the new recommended structure. And then lastly, we took a deep dive into what is the market trends right now amongst your competitors, and what do we find to be typical for a salary increase budget when it's time to adjust your ranges and keep them competitive. So along with going to market, evaluating your positions to determine where they fall, being able to create a salary structure, and then also gauging what type of percentage should be applied to that salary structure on an ongoing forward basis to keep it competitive for the upcoming fiscal year, is essentially what we were able to complete for the employee pay program side relative to salary review. We did recommend, in addition to below minimum adjustments, equity pay adjustments, we also recommended a 4% increase budget to the structure. And this is to put the structure in a competitive state as you begin to utilize it and implement it for village employees. Therefore, you won't have to come back to it and apply any adjustments to it in the near future, because we've been able to gauge the market and set the structure in place as it should begin for efficient use and to mitigate any starting pay practice challenges and any type of compression issues you may foresee or encounter right now within the village salaries. A total cost to do these below minimums, pay equity adjustments, and to apply the 4% increase to the actual structure will cost the village around $61,800, and that will be the total that the village is looking at for implementation for the structure if you were to implement the below minimums, the equity pay adjustments, and also apply the 4% increase to the actual structure. It's critical to at least address the minimum below minimums, because all employees should be set at least the minimum of their ranges. The equity adjustments is making sure that we've taken a deep dive into any compression and starting pay practices that's been an impact over the years, and to ensure that the structure works efficiently upon implementation. The 4% increase budget to the structure, that's optional. We recommend you do it because it just puts you at market relative to needing to do that in the future down the road to maintain market competitiveness with the structure. It keeps you competitive from the actual beginning. And as we got further into it, and if you were to adopt those adjustments, it takes the 90.3% compa ratio aggregate percentage for employees up to 100%. And so we deem 85% and below to be below competitiveness, 85% and above to be competitive. And so at a starting place for salaries and employee-based salaries at 90.1, we felt that's in a competitive place, but there were some adjustments that we felt needed to be made to make the structure work efficiently that would actually bring you up to market at 100%. In addition to the evaluation of salaries, I want to come back around to the employee benefits review. As I mentioned, this was in addition to taking a look at not just salaries and employee pay, but also wanted to look at the village's benefits package to determine competitiveness for that. Again, as mentioned, medical, dental, vision, retirement, PTO, life, AD&D insurance, long-term disability, and other benefits such as work-life balance options. Those particular benefits were reviewed amongst your competitors. And looking at that in the aggregate, we found that the village was competitive for those particular benefits packages amongst their peers. As we got further, deeper into the analysis and recommendations to the village around their benefits packages, what we did find and recommend, we think that the village should definitely maintain a fixed 457 plan contribution right now, which is 8%, and that's competitive amongst your peers. In addition to that, we found that the 3 medical plan options provided is in fact a good thing for the village. There's no need to add anything to those plans or enhance them. The village should also maintain the maximum ceiling for life insurance. Right now it's currently set at $250,000 without evidence of insurability. And those were the 3 predominant findings from the employee benefits review. In addition to that, some observations around employee benefits that I'll speak to was relative to PTO. We did find that some of the competitors, their actual accrual rate in some cases is higher than the village. And this is about the amount of hours that you can accrue relative to years of tenure at your particular organization. And so looking at the village, there's perhaps some enhancements that could be made around that. And also holidays. We found that right now the village, I believe, is currently offering 12 holidays. Amongst competitors, there's a possibility to get up to 14.5. So there's 2.5 additional holidays that can be added that can contribute to the overall benefits programs that are being offered. Essentially, that's what our summary provided. We did not have any financial impact from the benefits analysis. And so as to date, we feel that your plans are competitive and should remain in that state. But as far as salary and the recommendations around the new structure, just want to reiterate that the cost, for those 3 different reviews totaled at $61,800, and that's where the recommendations came in at for consideration. Any questions I can take at this point?
Thank you, Mr. Hutton. As I mentioned, the Personnel Committee will, at a future date, be diving more deeply into the report. I think, Mayor White, the intention here was to begin to give other council members a basic introduction to the report and the community as well. But let me see whether there are any questions about the material that's been presented. Councilman Schaefer.
I have to apologize. I'm a little confused about how this was. The council never got this report, so I pulled it up on my phone. I just found out about it recently, but I just wanted to ask you about a couple of things that stood out to me. So on page 21, if you can go to that, it's page 21 of the report. If you see that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yep.
So I'm not sure, when you say competitors, or do you mean like what's on this list here?
Correct. So what you're looking at on page 12 of the report is the demographic profile of the local municipalities that were surveyed. And so from this peer group population, this is who we're talking about as your deemed market. This applied to all positions. If you scroll down to, I think it's the next page, page 22, this is the demographic profile of all national municipalities that were surveyed only for the executive director, the village manager and the assistant village manager roles due to them being executive level positions. Executive level positions are typically recruited for on a national basis versus regional or local. And so that's why we considered looking at those roles from a national perspective. But to your point, yes, the market is the peer group selected on page 21.
Okay, so the first one you've got, and I don't know if people have had an opportunity to see it, but it's the city of Rockville, which you list has a budget of $101 million. I looked it up. I got $168 million. But the bigger point is $168 million, it's 50 times the size of our budget. They have 541 employees. Is that a realistic comp for us to use?
So in regards to coming up with a more substantial peer group, we wanted to have the ability to start with who we thought were actual true direct competitors relative to total revenue and number of employees, but we also wanted to include some other municipalities within the region that are comparables relative to the services they provide, and also looking at positions that are deemed to be found within those localities that we can compare to. Another reason why we chose the Pacific Peer Group is I think it was this town of, or this Chevy Chase Village, I believe it was, recently did a study and selected the same peer group for evaluation. And so we wanted to make sure that we were also accommodating that and capturing all possibilities of looking at roles that we can find concrete matches for. And other smaller jurisdictions, for example, some have 1 employee, some have 5 employees. This getting into 17, 20, 28, 18, and then the higher numbers gives us the ability to be able to find the positions we're actually looking for. Those other competitors with minimum amount of positions, they're actually not there. And they're there in some capacity, but you won't be able to find everything that the village has. And so that's why the actual peer group was selected. And you have a breadth of a bigger peer group entity within it, and then also the smaller ones.
Yeah, I appreciate the answer. I just don't get it. I don't get how a city with 541 employees should be in a comparison with a village that's got 12, and actually one of those 12 works, I think, 4 hours a week. So it's really 11. The second one on the list is City of Gaithersburg with an $86 million budget, 332 employees. I don't think it just gives me some pause as to the conclusions, because if you go down later in the list, you'll see the highest paid manager is the City of Rockville. The second highest paid manager is the City of Gaithersburg. And I don't, just looking at it quickly, if you just toss those two out, I think it would change your conclusions. I think if you look at the peers that are closer to us, I think, and only the ones around us, you draw a different conclusion. So, you use what you use, but I think the conclusions were just based on including data that should not have been included. And I'm also wondering, did you look at compensation as a percentage of the budget? I know you looked at healthcare as a percentage of salaries. But
So when we talk about, we looked at your payroll percentage and looking at your base salaries as a total relative to that. But if you go down to, to your points, but if you go down to page 1 of the appendix, this gets into the actual salaries of the competitors. And so you can get a good depth of where pay is from each village manager, for example. And you can look at this as it applies to all of the positions within the village. Without including the City of Gaithersburg and the City of Rockville, will be doing you a disservice relative to what your peers have recently evaluated as their peer group, which is really down the street from you at Chevy Chase Village. We looked at their study and looked at their comparables relative to why they selected their peers. And I feel like in order to be competitive and to stay in that same ballpark, we should be at least looking at the same market. And so looking at their pay and looking at how that impacts you here at the village, one would say and argue that the village salaries are definitely in a competitive state compared to the smaller villages or the smaller municipalities within the region. And so in order to have some more appetite and be able to figure out whether or not those salaries are truly competitive, that's when we expanded further within the localities and found that the town of Chevy Chase Village was also doing the same thing. So, I mean,
Councilman Schaefer will have, and you will have an opportunity both at the Personnel Committee, if you choose to attend, but also at a subsequent council meeting where recommendations from the Personnel Committee will arise with respect to the findings. And I suspect that some of the questions, if not many of the questions that you are raising here, will be addressed by the
Okay.
Personnel Committee, or I would encourage you to share them with the mayor, who's the chair of the Personnel Committee.
Okay.
So if you'd like to do one more question, then.
I'd
or
I'd
let
like
me
to do
see-
more than one more
Well, let me
question.
see whether there are other council.
This is the only opportunity we're going to have
No, you will have two other
to talk
opportunities.
to.
You'll have this, there will be other opportunities to talk.
So
to
I'm,
them.
I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
I'm Joshua Hutton.
Was Joshua going to come to the Personnel Committee?
I think- yeah. So let me see whether there's any other.
Well, then I'll ask the one more
Let me-
question you
Let me see
you
whether there
gave
are
me.
other members of the council who'd like to ask questions. Councilman R?
Just one question for clarification. The 90.3% was total compensation, and then the higher number was the benefits as an element of the total compensation, or they were the two aspects of compensation,
Two separate things.
two separate things. So
So-
90, we're at 90.3% for salary and 100% for benefits, and together they make the overall number?
No. So without getting into the detail of this, so that's going to take me a little further into it. Can we go to slide, hold on one second. Can we go to slide, page 32? So this is show you Exhibit 6. Exhibit 6 is a display of the salary structure I mentioned with the 6 different salary grades. And so you have all the village employees, their current tenure, their new base salaries effective as of July, and then how those base salaries compare to the recommended midpoints. And then to your far right, that's the comp ratio analysis. At the very bottom of that column is 90.3, and so that's that percentage in aggregate. If we are to apply the minimums, one minimum, below minimum adjustment for one employee, and we're recommending 5 within range adjustments for 5 other employees. If you were to do those adjustments along with applying the 4%, that gets you up to 101% of the market. So that's talking specifically about salary.
About base salary. Is there an overall number for competitiveness that includes base salary and additional benefits?
Looked at separately. For benefits, your benefits are deemed as market competitiveness. If we could go down to slide, I'll show you another slide for benefits within the same report. That's on page 41. So this is the analysis of the village's benefits for each benefit program offered. And so degree of competitiveness, you see at the bottom. If we felt that that particular benefit was less than competitive, it would be marked as less than competitive. If we felt that it was competitive, it would be competitive. More than competitive is the next rank.
So there's no value assigned to that you could compare alongside the base salary to come up with sort of an overarching number of overall compensation competitiveness?
Typically, we don't do it that way.
Yeah, okay.
What's displayed is how it's presented.
All right, thanks. I just wanted to understand how the numbers.
If I can
Yeah.
follow up on that slide. So we pay, I think, 100% of medical, vision, and dental. And you concluded that was competitive, but not, what would it have taken to get a rating of more than competitive?
To be doing something more than your competitors.
More than 100%?
Yeah.
Oh.
So if other competitors are doing something similar to that,
And could
then
we
you're
get a
competitive.
list of the competitors that are paying 100%? Do you have that?
you have all the benefit information from the competitors provided to the village manager.
It-
Yes.
No, it gives the it gives the insurance available, not the employer contribution.
Excuse me? Say that again?
It looks to me, and again, we haven't had a lot of time to see this, but it looks like you're listing the healthcare options available, but not the employer contribution, which for us is 100%. So I'm curious how 100% doesn't get us into the highest category, unless everyone's paying 100%.
And so again, that's going to be determined upon your peers and what they are actually paying.
So can you
I don't-
give us a list of what percentage the employers are paying?
And I mentioned that I have, and it's been given to the village manager. So it's not in this report, so you can see it from
Okay.
there. But you're looking at the competitiveness of the market.
So
from the
we
peers.
have been provided with that.
Correct.
Okay, and let me just ask one more then.
Sure,
Mhm.
go
The
ahead.
base salaries you looked at were as of what date?
July of this year,
July. So it incorporated the,
increases of this
Okay.
year.
because it looked like the number didn't go up even from when you were using the prior
So,
data.
Since this being the first time you've seen the report has changed. And so previously, we had older salaries with a completely different analysis with a higher cost because they were
Okay.
older salaries. Once we implemented the new salaries and made those adjustments, that cost went down.
It did good, okay.
So, yeah.
All right, I'm just remembering the first one from the slides, and, okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Schaefer. Other council members who have any questions? Again, this will be discussed at, I think, the next Personnel Committee meeting,
And
and
will
and-
Joshua be at that meeting? Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Hutton, thank you very much for coming tonight and providing a brief introduction to the report.
You're welcome.
Yep.
Thank you for having
Good
me.
to see you. Let me return to the agenda that you have in front of you now. The first item there are chair's announcements, and I have a number to make tonight. One of the line items in the adopted budget for the fiscal year '25 budget, which was adopted by the council, is $4,000 for what in essence are new ideas contracts. And the language that the committee looked at and the council had an opportunity to look at also described this new initiative of the village council as follows: smart, creative, life and professionally experienced people populate the village of Friendship Heights. Some likely have practical ideas which could improve the quality of life for village residents. Through a formal council-initiated process of solicitation, review, and selection, this line item will support contracts to offer new services or amenities for village residents, those suggested by village residents. And these services and amenities might be continued and or grown either by village staff or under contract in subsequent years. So over the next month or two, materials will be developed with input of council members to solicit these ideas which may exist in the village. They may exist, they may not, but we're eager to hear what ideas of village residents might be that could be supported by these funds. So I'd be happy to talk with anyone further about this eventual solicitation after the meeting or at a future date. Second, I'd like to thank Councilman Measy. You'll notice that there's an item relating to the chairmanship of the Parks and Grounds Committee, which Councilman Measy has chaired for the last several months. We'll get an update about Page Park later in the meeting, but Councilman Measy, I recognize the challenges that were associated with chairing the committee over the last few months, and I want to thank you for shouldering that responsibility. Third, the Development Committee at its last meeting heard from Atara Margulies, who will be the chief staff person from the County Parks Department on the development of the new Friendship Heights sector plan. Ms. Margulies has indicated that she would like to, and I have accepted her request, to attend the October council meeting to provide a briefing about the process that the planning department will be using for the new sector plan. We learned at the development committee that the process is going to look different than it looked for the development of the last sector plan. As I look out in the audience, I see a number of residents who have spoken repeatedly about that sector plan and who have talked repeatedly about their interest in the new sector plan. So I encourage those who are here, those who are watching, those who might want to attend the October meeting, to come prepared to listen to how the county planning department will be planning to implement and develop the new sector plan. I've mentioned at previous meetings that this will be a marathon rather than a sprint. It's not expected that the final sector plan will be developed until almost 2 years from now, will be approved. It will go through multiple rounds of review and approval, both by the Planning Commission itself and by the County Council before there is a new sector plan. So we are expecting they will begin their process to develop the plan this fall. Ms. Margulies' presentation to us is a very early presentation about it. In the year 2024, it likely will be the year 2026, maybe even the year 2027 before there is a new sector plan for the village of Friendship Heights. Fourth, some of you may be following the various initiatives that are coming out of the planning department. The Friendship Heights sector plan is only one of them. Recently presented by the county planning department was a new report and set of recommendations which were referred to as the attainable housing recommendations, which would have a significant influence on how development occurs in communities and neighborhoods around us. We are already fully developed, perhaps, except for a few parcels whose use could change as a result of this report. But I would like to refer you all to information that now sits on the village website within the development committee's listings, where we have placed all of the documents that are relating to development within Montgomery County, and the Attainable Housing Report is one of those. And I commend you all to take a look through it to see what kinds of changes the planning department is proposing for Montgomery County. There are links to that document. In addition, the county council president and the chair of the planning department have announced listening sessions where they are interested in obtaining hearing feedback to the report that's been issued by the planning department. Those feedback sessions are both live and over Zoom. And so those who are interested in signing up for a speaking opportunity at either listening session will have an opportunity to do so, and the link to do that is on the village website as well. Third, with respect to the Attainable Housing Report, the Village of Friendship Heights is one member of the CCCFH, which is an organization started many years ago at which neighborhoods and other communities that surround us and that take an interest in the global scope of affairs in our area meet on a regular basis to discuss issues that arise and to form recommendations. The CCCFH held a very informative session with County Executive Elrich, with our land use attorney, Michelle Rosenbaum, and with another individual speaking on a third aspect. County Executive Elrich talked about the data in the Attainable Housing Study and whether it really applied to present circumstances. Michelle talked about the legal framework for this study and the set of recommendations, and whether there was much that could be done to influence it. So a link to that video session is not on the website right now, but I'm reaching out to the CCCFH to obtain that link. To those who are interested in development issues within the village and in surrounding areas, I commend you to each of these links and commend taking the time to either read through them or listen to them. Next, during the village manager's report, Julian is going to provide information about a meeting he and I held with the Geico representative to talk about their plans with respect to the Geico property. So I'll leave that to Julian. And lastly, before moving on to the next item, we're going to be removing the second item that is under old business. Tonight, it won't be discussed or voted on, and that is the discussion, listed as the discussion vote on proposals for ADA compliance work at the Red House. The village manager is seeking additional information and awaits that information from at least 2 potential vendors. So we won't be doing that. There will only be 2 items now under old business remaining. With that, let me move to the next item on the agenda, which is comments from the public to the council. And thanks, Jason. Remind those who are here that if you wish to speak, please sign up. You have 3 minutes to address the council. There will be a warning at 30 seconds, and then your time will be concluded after 3 minutes. Please use as much of the 3 minutes as you wish, but I will intervene at the second alarm. Please be respectful of others. Please keep in mind that this is your opportunity to speak, but not to engage in conversation or dialogue with council members or staff. There are multiple other opportunities to do that. Let me then...
Are you saying we don't have freedom of speech here? You're telling me who I can talk to and who I can't when I have my 3 minutes?
Thank you. The first person who has signed up to speak is Al Muller.
Did you just say that we can't speak to who we want to speak to?
Al Muller, please, 3 minutes.
Put that on tape. We have First Amendment rights here. Say what?
Thank you. Mr. Al Muller.
First Amendment rights, I think they go beyond Robert's Rules of Order. Maybe. I
Al-
don't know where you come from.
Al Muller. Excuse me. Excuse me.
I hope the
Excuse me.
clock's not running. I hope the clock's not
Dr.
running.
Muller, please.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. First of all, thank you for putting on the website some of the financial data for the last month, so those that look at the website can see it before the meeting. And I think this is an important first step. I gave the council a number of my thoughts at the last 2 meetings, but I think it's only the first step. I do think it's very important, as I said before, that the treasurer give a monthly report of what's in I think that the treasurer should give each month a financial report, which I know the council gets each week, so that the public can see it each month. I noticed that at the end of the fiscal year, at the end of June, there was a particularly important report, which is now available. But for those watching and those here tonight, they may not go on the website. And I think you should have the public revelation the same way you present material on the Red House and Page Park, which you also have on the website. The final report for the year at the end of June was that the village had in its total accounts $3,136,781, of which $133,000 was a surplus. It was a very good year. Every year for the last number of years has been a very good year. And the material that was on the table tonight that I see for the first time simply shows that over the last few years, we got a lot more in revenues than we expected. But every year, the council, you all, present a balanced budget where the revenues and the expenses are balanced. This is the first year, this last year, that it was very close. But even with that, it was $133,000. And in addition to essentially, at the end of this fiscal year, $3.1 million in your reserves, you also anticipate, thanks to the brilliant negotiations of Councilmember Measy, another $1 million is expected in April for a total of $4 million. And that money can be spent on capital improvements, emergencies, and certainly, if needed, for operating expenses. However, that is more than enough to cover the renovations of the Red House, Page Park, the bus ramp, the police, and for staff benefits, and still leave hundreds of thousands of dollars in the reserves. I think it's unfortunate that tonight you're getting material that shows the potential expenses looking ahead, but not that $1 million. That's not fair. That's not fair. It really isn't. So thank you for putting the first step of my many questions, and that is that the public be able to see month by month exactly what the council is getting. Thank you again for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Muller. Kathleen Kester?
Good evening. I'm a resident of Willard Towers. I just have two very positive things to say, if we can stand it. One, we all know we had a little bit of excitement in the village recently. We had a barricade situation. It ended peacefully. There was a major law enforcement present. It all went on textbook right. One of the things that was textbook right was the work that Jason did online in our notification system. We have a system that will notify you of events, but it also notifies you of emergencies. It worked perfectly. It was timely, it was clear, it was concise, and it was reassuring. So thank you, Jason. I'm most appreciative. Second thing was, I was delinquent. I originally got the public safety report, and I just kind of went through it because I was up to my eyeballs, frankly, campaigning. And about a week ago, I actually sat down and read every single word. Viewed solely from the standpoint of a villager not steeped in all these issues, it was so informative. It was so truthful. It didn't pretend to know things it didn't know. It suggested in what direction we might go to gain the information we needed to know. And it was incredibly informative about a village I've been in for 20 years and things I didn't know. I feel safer now. I'm certainly more observant than I was before, and I'm very grateful for the report. Long ago, I was a consultant with Booz Allen. I read that report and it brought back such memories of how to report something to a community that you honestly want to understand what's going on. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kester. Patricia Canessa?
Yes, I am Patricia Canessa, and I live at the Willoughby. And there is a couple of comments. One of them, it was a shame that we didn't have an opportunity to have some questions regarding the personnel policies. Yes, because there is an exaggeration, and I think that there is an over-concentration, that would be the word, in all the stimulus that you would like to have and retention of staff. Are you listening to me? Yes? Okay. And in reality, a good job is not a job that pays you well only. A good job is a job where you can grow. And the reason you retain people is because you have those growth opportunities. In reality, there is not too much work that has been at least presented during the presentation of this policy that speaks about that growth process, and the fact that every job is an open door in which the employee can stay, can grow, and can go to something better. Because to set the trap in reality of good salaries for people that hopefully will do a better life in some other place is really not good for the town, not good for the council, not good for anybody. Okay, that's the first comment. The second comment has to do with the fact that we had an incident in which transportation of a child was in danger, and apparently members of this council have been informed regarding that process. I think that is a failure to the public trust. In reality, we cannot change rules or ADA regulations that have been established for the protection of the vulnerable, the people that has special conditions, and that in reality, a full system needs to be responsible for that. Before you make a decision of that kind, I will highly recommend that you do a thorough consultation regarding where to go, because it has been certainly eroding that trust that we have in a council, and certainly is very important for our community at the time in which we are talking about development and growth. Thank you.
Thank you. Roger Cacchetti?
I'm Roger Cocchetti. I live in the Willoughby and have a couple of comments I was going to make. I have been following demographics of Friendship Heights for a while, and I wanted to note that without trying to be statistically accurate, I don't believe that the Census Bureau data is keeping up to date with changes, important changes that are taking place. I'll use one small example, but I think this is an area the council should follow closely, and that is, in my case, in my hallway, in my building, when I moved in 5 years ago, I was the youngest person in the hallway. Today, I'm the oldest person in the hallway, and I didn't go through a time tunnel. There are demographic changes taking place in Friendship Heights that are important. Similarly, as a real estate investor, I watch property values in Friendship Heights, and for reasons that have nothing whatsoever to do with the planning department's affordable housing initiatives, our real property values after inflation are flat or going down. That has everything to do with Ballston, the Wharf, and other new neighborhoods, Noma and other new neighborhoods that Friendship Heights is competing with, and nothing to do with government mandates. So I think we should be clear that our neighborhood is increasing its affordability through natural causes. Lastly, and the big picture issue I wanted to make is, I've mentioned before that we punch way below our weight when it comes to county politics. Take, for example, Tacoma Park. It's 3 times larger than us, 300 times more influential. When the planning department proposed a 2-story building to be put up in Tacoma Park, the town council opposed it, and the county council unanimously rejected it. Guess where the chairman of the planning commission lives, and guess where most of the members of the planning commission historically have lived? In Tacoma Park. We need to take an initiative to increase our influence at the county level. I've suggested this before as somebody who has been a paid lobbyist in the past. You hire a retired county council member to represent Friendship Heights in Rockville. That's how it works. And last point is, as a condominium resident, I think another issue I'd like to raise is that condominium owners are being discriminated against in comparison with single-family homeowners. Condominium owners are single-family dwelling owners that are arrayed vertically. Our neighbors are single-family dwelling owners arrayed horizontally. We are arrayed vertically, but we are single-family homeowners and should be treated with the same respect and deference that people who live in single-family homes or raised horizontally get. And it's an issue for the majority of the Friendship Heights residents who are condominium owners. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Dorsey?
Yes, let me start by saying that I wanted, Julian, for you and your staff to know that my wife and I never believed that you were being overpaid. I know that there's members on this council here that started this witch hunt at a cost of $25,000 because they think you are, but my wife and I don't believe you are. So, now, to speak to the council, this is not for everyone on the council, because everyone on the council doesn't have the same views and doesn't take the same stands. 18 months ago, when this new council was seated, we had this village had a system of allowing residents to speak on issues at council meetings and so forth. And when this regime came in, the three new members, Mr. Pastrunk, Mr. Roy Schaefer, and Ms. Bolt, moved to change all that. And I guess the reason that they changed it is because Mr. Pastrunk wanted more time for his manifestos at the beginning of each meeting, and Mr. Schaefer needed more time for his bureaucratic gobbledygook. You've done away with the finance report that I'm glad that Dr. Mueller gave it this evening. Thank you. And I hope you do it every month, because I believe the village deserves it. We don't get written minutes anymore. They've swept them back into the computer system. I guess you three think that everyone in the village are couch potatoes sitting at home looking at a computer screen. I'm not one of them. My wife's not one of them. If you want to sweep everything in there because you know people aren't going to go to look at it, I guess you can continue to do it because you're elected. But I'm telling you, I don't like it, and no one is going to tell me who I can speak to, Mr. Pastrunk. No one.
Cameron Nudie?
And if anybody else got a problem with it, let me know.
Cameron Moody from the Elizabeth. I just wanted to follow up on some of the comments on development. I think that we're all seeing at the national and more local levels that there is a push for additional housing and a repurposing of commercial buildings that are no longer needed in the form that they're currently in. I say that because I think the writing is on the wall for what's coming with the sector plan. Whether you look at it as an attainable housing initiatives, initiatives for institutional properties, or an overall push for density, I think that what is coming is going to be a shift from what we've seen in the past, and that we need to get on one page on what our asks will be. I think that pushback may not be as effective as we imagine. So whether we're asking for new street lights or decorative sidewalks or public arts and murals, I think that we need to figure out what we want to get from this, because I think we all see clearly what's coming. And it's because not only the affordability issues, it's not only because of the obsolescence of office buildings, which I think Bethesda 25% vacancy rate at this point. And they see it going much higher, not very far into the distance. I think that we also need to think about the fact that we need revenue as a community and as a county. So we're working in an environment where I think sometimes it's positioned as the politicians are in cahoots with the developers and there's something nefarious going on, but I think the reality is, much like we see in our budget, they are projecting shortfalls because revenue is down. We see it in Washington, D.C., we see it in Alexandria, we see it in Bethesda, we see it across the country. And these governments are trying to figure out as quickly as possible how they can make up for these projected revenue shortfalls. I think it's interesting that it was presented that this building that's going to take the place of Brooks Brothers is going to be given an injection to us, not only through the $1 million payment, but also through revenue we're going to be bringing in from new residents. I think that the way we view that is the way the county views development opportunities. It's either they're going to raise taxes or cut services, and unfortunately, residents don't like either. So the only alternative is to find new revenue streams. So I think that we need to become more comfortable with the fact that we either want to pay more in taxes, is what we've heard here in our community, or we need new revenue streams represented by these buildings. And we just need to realize that these buildings aren't falling out of coconut trees. They are in an environment where we're trying to find solutions to big problems. And so because we're going to be giving potentially a lot, we need to be asking for a lot. And I think that's how we need to be shaping our viewpoints.
Thank you. There is no one else who has signed up to speak. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Seeing no one, move on. Yes. Just a second, though, because
It's half a second. Yes, my question is, what happened with all these observations that we bring and we have a conversation with this council? How we get a response to this? Because I see that some people many times brings very valuable comments, but I don't know if there is a follow-up on that, if there is a research on that, if there is a recommendation on that, or you are going back to the person and say the person, well, you take care of this problem. But I would like to hear in the future from the council a response to these questions. Thank you. Was a minute.
are there comments from council members? Seeing none, Mayor White.
Thank you. This Saturday, September 14th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., Goodwill will host a donation drive outside the Village Center. The Goodwill truck will park on Friendship Boulevard near the Village Center's main entrance. Goodwill will be accepting donations of household goods, electronics, and other items. Check our website for more information. The next scheduled council meeting will be Tuesday, October 15th at 7 p.m. at the Village Center. Please note the date change due to the holiday on Monday, the 14th. At the next council meeting on October 15th, Atara Margulies with the Montgomery County Planning Department will be here to announce the official kickoff of the Friendship Heights Sector Plan, including a discussion of the planned schedule and process to be followed. And on a somewhat personal note, I wanted to mention that we recently lost a longtime resident of the village, Nancy White, no relation to me. She lived in the Willoughby, and she was a member of the Program Advisory Committee, and at one time she also ran for village council. So please remember Nancy and keep her in your prayers. She was a resident of Virginia when she passed away.
Thank you, Mayor White. Move on to the approval of the minutes from the July 8th council meeting. Councilmember Salt.
Thank you. The minutes are behind tab 2, and I move that the council adopt the minutes of July 8th, 2024.
There's been a motion to adopt the minutes from July 8th, 2024. Is there support for that motion? Second. Supported by Councilmember Tyler. Is there any discussion about the minutes? Seeing none, a call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Carries unanimously. I will abstain.
And you're abstaining. Okay.
On the treasurer's report, which follows next, Councilmember Schaefer.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for joining us. I hope everyone had a nice summer. I want to talk about three things, and this list just expanded a little bit. First, the treasurer's report that's on the website, it's not a treasurer's report. I don't prepare it, I don't post it. They're accounting statements. And I know typically they have been read. They are on the website, the 24/7. They are current. What is on the website now is exactly what the council got Friday, and I want to thank the staff for getting that posted quickly. Perhaps we can have printed copies at the desk for people who don't want to go online and look at them, but, you know, I choose not, because they are so readily available, I choose to focus on things I think people need to hear. Some people think it's gobbledygook. Some people thank me for doing it. I can't, but that's how I see my role, not just to literally sit here and read account balances to you. I also want to point out that I do disagree with something Chairman Pestrunk said about that new initiatives. That definition was actually rejected at the Finance Committee because it read an awful lot like a grant program. It came back with sort of a new description to be sort of like a one-off idea, and I'm fairly positive, and we could check this, that when I presented it, when we were approving the budget, I specifically said it would be for sort of a one-time expense. Councilmember Measy, and I think I said this, suggested, he wasn't suggesting it as an idea, but an example of something we might do with the funds is a car charger. So that's sort of what we were looking at when it got approved, not to be the sort of open-ended grant-like program where even staff can authorize and approve expenses. And obviously we might be discussing that, but that's not my understanding of what that money was to be used for. I want to give an update on the Artist House. At the last meeting, I made a motion to raise their rent by $500. It's the first time in 3 years anyone suggested an increase. That was agreed to, and I think, was the lease signed yet? Or so, okay.
Yes, the lease has been signed.
All right, thank you. So that's
yes.
going. It's not a huge amount of income, but we will be getting some increased revenue, and it's still a very, very fair rent for the artists that are in there. Okay, so now, those were the administrative things. So now I wanted to talk about last year's budget, and the fiscal year did end June 30th. I did not talk about this at the July meeting because the data wasn't ready yet. So I'm going to go through it now. I'll do it quickly because a lot of it is sort of superseded. And these numbers that I'm giving you are unaudited, so they are subject to change. So we were, the $133,000 that was referred to was the projected surplus as we posted. The actual surplus was $122,000. And I'll just go through some of the major, and again, it's available. If someone needs a copy, we could provide it if it's not still on the website. The income came in about $75,000 below budget, and that's in spite of being $25,000 over on our interest. And the reason for that, and this is sort of continuing a trend, our income tax revenue came in below what we've been projecting. And the other big difference where we were under was parking ticket revenue. We were $25,000 under below budget. I think more importantly, we were $40,000 below the actual amount of last year. So that was a big hit to our income to be $40,000 less. This year it's still early in the year, but we're actually running a little bit behind last year's numbers. And the expenses were about $65,000 below what we budgeted. A lot of that was for one-offs that are not going to repeat. For example, the shuttle contract, we were $36,000 below budget. It's not because we cut the cost, we just simply over budgeted. So that accounts for that. The shuttle budget for this year is more closer to the actual, so that won't happen again. The snow budget was, the snow expense was $20,000 below budget. That can't happen again because we cut the budget 15. So even if we have the same snow this year as next year, we would be 5,000 under. A legal expense was 19,000 under. That's not going to repeat because, as you can imagine, we have substantial additional legal fees relating to the Red House, relating to Page Park. It would be a shock to me at this point if we actually stayed within our budget, but we certainly, I don't expect to to be under, and we had a lot of expenses just relating to our parks, our maintenance, the water, the fountains, that where we try to be conservative when we budget that, and those did come under, and that contributed to the expenses being under. And the last issue I wanted to mention were lecture fees. We budgeted those at $20,000. We spent $3,000, and that's important because lecture fees aren't sort of a keep the door open expense. These are programs that we provide to everybody. So you could call it a savings. You can also call it a program cut. And this year we've cut that budget in half from $20,000 to $10,000, and it gets sort of to the heart of what I'm going to talk about next, which is our deficit. And we are already starting to cut programs now to make room in our budget for other expenses. So it's not that, some theoretical thing that's going to happen years out. It's not a major hit, but we're starting to see our programs affected today. And I didn't want to have to do this again. I don't like talking about it. Every month people don't like hearing it. But, sometimes I hear from people who should know better that we have plenty of money, or I read in a committee report that we have a surplus. Neither one of those things are true, so I wanted to try to address it again. So the budget that we post on our website, the budget that was referred to earlier, this year it's projecting a break even, okay? But that's not, and I've said this before, it's not a fair representation. We are operating at a deficit, and I'll give you a very common sense definition. This year, we're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars more than we take in, okay? Even though you don't see it on our website, because the budget we show, and I'm going to put it up in a minute, it does not include the tens of thousands of dollars we're spending this year to maintain this building. It's getting older. Doesn't include the at least $150,000 we're going to have to spend on the Red House, at least $200,000 we're going to spend. We still owe on the Page Park contract is probably at least another $100,000 that's yet that we know we're going to spend. It's not clear who's going to pay for that, but we've already been told by the inspectors there is a substantial amount of additional work that needs to be done that was not anticipated in the contract. Our budget doesn't include road maintenance, sidewalks, capital expenditures on parks, artist buildings, speed bumps. We don't show you that, and the reason it's a problem is we don't set aside any money in our budget to pay for that. Most budgets, you make a contribution to a capital fund, it replenishes the fund. We don't do that. So all of the money, all of those expenses come 100% from our savings. And yes, we have a lot of money now. Someone recently told me I scare people when I say that. That's not my intent, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I waited till we're out of money and say we're out of money. I'm trying to get ahead of where we're going because we just can't sustain longer term, not this year, not next year, the year after, but we're really on a very bad path. And I want to leave you, if you could put up that slide, please. And this shows, and again,
excuse me, which
the one with the revenue and expenses. So this shows, and it's just an updated version of a slide I presented previously. This shows, again, only operating expenses, what we put on our website. The blue line on top is our revenue. The brown line on the bottom is our expenses. And I won't go through it all, you have it. But what I do want to point out is if you look at that last piece from 2024 actual, and it's subject to final audit adjustments. That brown line, it's increasing, well, let me start with the top line. The revenue line is increasing by 3.8%. We're projecting that we will have 3.8% more money than what we got last year. The brown line underneath is rising 8.8%, and that's why they're meeting, okay? We are increasing our spending more than double the rate we're increasing our revenue, and that's just not a new thing. If you go back to 2020, that blue line from 2020 to 2025, it's an 11% increase. If you look at the brown line underneath from 2020 to 2025, it's a 26% increase. So we have, and when I say we, I mean the councils that approve these budgets, we have If you go back 1 year, if you go back 5 years, our expenses have been increasing more than double the rate of our revenue, and that's just math. That's not my opinion. So if you wanted to extend that brown line another year and extend that blue line, they're going to cross. And if you look at that area between the brown and the blue, that money has saved us. That money has gone to pay for the capital expenses. So even though we haven't necessarily set aside money, we've had it available. Next year, without any changes, when those lines cross, not only will there be no contribution to our capital expenses, we're going to have to take money out of our savings for our operating expenses. And again, it's not my intent to scare people. It's just pointing out where we are. And if we can go to the other slide, please. This just shows, and again, this comes right off our audited financial statements. It's a little skewed because we have receivables and payables I didn't include, but these are our year-end cash balances. It jumped, I think that's $6.3 million in 2022. The big drop is mostly due to the Red House. The 831 number is, you can't see the comments, but I subtracted the minimum payments we know we have to make on the Red House and the park, which is $350,000. But the real takeaway I want people to see is I mentioned that we had, maybe I didn't, the surpluses we had from 20 to 25 on operating were 1.8 million. With that 1.8 million, look what happened to our cash balance. So this is where we're headed longer term, and people don't like to hear it, people don't want to deal with it. But in spite of $1.8 million in operating surpluses, our cash continues to fall. That trend's going to continue. So, I mean, I don't know at what point we want to get serious about addressing it, but at some point I will. I know you have questions. Maybe the chair will allow me to take questions. Otherwise, I always have office hours by appointment if anybody wants to meet with me. Thank you.
See if there are questions from or comments from the council. Councilman Measy.
I always enjoy Roy's gloom and doom. When we talked about it, I talked with him about it today. I referred to him lovingly as Chicken Little, waiting for the skies falling on us. These projections are interesting to see, and they do raise some questions for us. The questions, it seems to me, though, that I'd like to hear Councilman Schaefer's suggestions is, what do we do? Which programs should we cut? Which salaries should we cut? Which staff members should we fire? What should we do? Should we raise taxes? He's very good at pointing out to you that we have these problems, and they may come to fruition 4 years from now, 3 years from now, 6 years from now. We don't know what it is, but he wants us to do something, or at least be afraid that the whole world's about to come to an end. What's the solutions here? What are we talking about? And it's important for people like Roy, who raise these questions, to offer solutions. And all he's saying is, we have this problem. I'm not convinced.
Can I respond? Well, I'm not sure what you convinced. I mean, if you think I said something that's objectively wrong, I'd like to hear it. But in terms of solutions, it's my job to point this out. It's the council's job to offer solutions. It's the council's job to deal with revenue and expenses and make tough decisions, which I will say as a group, we have not shown a willingness to make. But it's not my job to point out how we fix this problem, just that we have the problem. And maybe also, if people make suggestions, to advise on the impact of that. But I'm one of 7 votes on approving expenses, and to the extent that we can influence income to do that. Thank you.
Any other comments from council members? Councilmember Solt.
I would add to this discussion in 2 ways, agreeing that every one of us voted on budgets. Every one of us, when we're presented with an expense that's in our packet, we vote on it. It is not one person's responsibility to identify like where to cut. It's all of us. We're all responsible for the budget and acknowledgement of revenues. I would also suggest that of the people sitting here, probably, I would say without a doubt, Roy is the most experienced financial professional. I don't think anyone else has worked in that area, I would say, except for me. But I would give credit to Roy as being the expert on this. And I think, we can have legitimate differences of opinion, but sort of minimizing the view that Roy's presenting in a sort of mocking way, I don't think is helpful. And I appreciate that we take the issue seriously.
Other comments from council members? I would simply say that there are a range of alternatives available to us. The discussions at Finance Committee and the budget that was presented to the council this year was a group effort. And I would say that adopting a budget for on an annual basis and to address projected issues in the future is a team sport, and that is not the result of a single individual on council and actions that are taken. The advantage of having a number of different people on the council is that there are a range of different expertises available to address the budget and to address whatever other issues come before the council. We did take steps in this year's budget to address some of the issues that Councilmember Schaefer raised in the Finance Committee and then at the council. And I suspect that when we get into discussions about this year's budget, that Councilmember Schaefer will again use his expertise and perspective and share that with other council members and with members of the public who attend the public sessions. I think the budget and its revenue and expenses are empirical questions, and what we see is what actually happens each year, in addition perhaps to what is projected. We have taken steps over the past couple of months, including with respect to the moving funds into the capital expenditure budget. We'll have another opportunity to move funds into the capital expenditure budget or elsewhere when the next couple of CDs come to roost. And I think that as we all become, including each of us, become better informed about the opportunities that exist for us to both adopt a balanced budget and to think about expenditures in the future, that we will do that in a responsible way that takes advantage of the expertise that all of us have. So I want to move on to the village manager's report then, Julian.
Thank you. Page Park. So I attended a pre-construction inspection meeting with the contractor from Green Sweep and the inspector from the County Department of Permitting Services last week. This information has been posted on our website. I posted my notes of the meeting because we do not get an official inspector's report from DPS. The largest item remaining still required for us to do is third-party inspections. We have to do 3 additional inspections with a third-party inspector, meaning not Montgomery County. Green Sweep will have to speak with the structural engineer, get a recommendation for third-party inspectors, and come in and do inspections for the pergola footings, the anchor bolts, and the slabs. All 3 of these are required to be done and then submitted back to the county for final approval. So Green Sweep is in the process now of identifying a firm to be able to do that and bring them in to complete these inspections. We were also told that the ADA compliance form was incorrectly signed by Green Sweep, and it should have been signed by a licensed professional, which would include either an architect or an engineer, despite the fact that DPS had approved this form previously and had notified us with the permit approval that all of these drawings were approved. The inspector effectively overruled the prior approvals and indicated that the form has to be resubmitted with the signature of an engineer. So Green Sweep is proceeding to get that done. And one other item is the main pathway handrail, the drawings for the pathway and the handrail have to include a slope measurement, which was not included originally, and again, not required originally by DPS, but is required by the inspector. And so Green Sweep has to go back to the structural engineer, get those measurements taken, indicated on the drawings, and then resubmitted to DPS for approval. When all of those items are done, we will have a follow-up inspection with the county DPS. If that is the final inspection, then at that point, we would get some approval from DPS. Until that point, the fencing has to remain up at Page Park. The park has to remain closed, and Green Sweep is in the process of following up on these remaining items, and we will update the council and the community as we hear more. I also want to mention the Communications Committee has been working on a website page dedicated to Page Park, and I think Councilmember Soul will probably mention this in the Communications Committee report, and we will expect to have that up in the near future. It's basically in test mode right now, and that will contain my inspection report I just gave, and any other additional highlights and updates will be posted on that page. Second item for me is the GEICO meeting, which Chairman referred to, and this is a very quick report because the representative from GEICO didn't have a whole lot to tell us other than that they are still there, they are still doing their thing, they do not have any development plans, they do not have any plans to sell the company, they do not have any plans to move, they do not have any plans to partner with a development firm, they're just still doing their thing in status quo for being an insurance firm. They will be involved in the sector plan process. They will definitely be engaged with it, but they basically said they will probably keep a lower key profile because of the nature of the business of what they do. Emily Smith is her name, by the way. She's the head of Senior Director Real Estate Strategy for GEICO is the person that we met with. Thank you.
Any questions for Village Manager?
Yeah, I think I know the answer. I just want to clarify. These 3 additional reports we need, that's in addition to the stormwater study, right?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
the stormwater study was not referenced by the inspector. That's a separate requirement that we have. He didn't really, he didn't address that one way or the other. He said that's not his area, but we do know that we have to do that separately, and that's why
Okay.
we have that on the agenda this evening.
And 1 or all 4 of these studies could result in additional costs to do whatever is recommended from those reports.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
Certainly the stormwater study.
I mean, the cost, the stormwater study, we have proposals that we'll
Right.
discuss later this evening.
But that proposal is to recommend the work that then has to be done.
The proposal for stormwater is to do the study that then has to be submitted
Right.
and approved, and then that leads to potentially having to do some
Right, so-
construction on site, which would be an additional cost.
Right,
Yes.
and none of these 4 reports were costs that were anticipated in the contract we signed.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Moore?
I'm not sure that we're in a position to say one way or another yet to answer your question, right? I think there remains an open question whether any of this work is in fact contemplated in the contracts. I don't know. I think that's my opinion.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Yes. Councilmember Soul.
To the extent you know the answer to this, what is a slab? What part of the park, in layman's language, is a slab? Is it the?
It's the concrete slab that's below the stone surfaces. So I think predominantly they're referring to the main patio area.
Sort of the circular.
That has stone above concrete slab. So the slab itself would have to be inspected. Now, this can be done through photos.
Is it what you're walking, I mean, the circular thing or something else?
It sounds like it's predominantly the circular patio area, the main circular area in the middle of the park. that has all the stonework and it's flat.
Okay.
And it has a concrete surface
Surface,
below the
okay.
stone. That's the concrete slab.
Okay, and do you know what kind of test is necessary for that?
No.
Okay.
The inspector indicated, the third-party inspector
That's
will
what the
let
experts
you
are
know.
for, right?
Yeah. They can approve it based on drawings you have. They can approve it based on photos that the contractor provides while the work was being done, or they could indicate that they have to do a core sample and drill into the slab,
So
which
remains
would be
to be
more
seen then.
involved and more expensive. So that remains to be seen. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for the village manager? Seeing none, move on to committee reports. The first one is the report. Sure. Councilmember Salt has asked for a 5-minute break to personal reasons. Yep. So if without objection, we'll take a 5-minute break. It's 8:26. Start again at 8:31. and Elza McCoy from the County Planning Department, discussing providing preliminary information about their process at the Planning Department for the sector plan for Friendship Heights. As I mentioned in my opening comments, there will be another opportunity to hear likely exactly what they told us in the Development Committee, plus anything else that they've decided at the Planning Department about the process that they will use over the next 2 years to come up with the new sector plan. So I invite certainly anyone who is interested in that to listen in to the October meeting or to be here and be present for her presentation at October's meeting. It will be, to whatever extent it needs to be, an update on what she presented at the Development Committee meeting. I'll move to Councilmember Solt for a report on the Communications Committee meeting of July 23rd.
At our meeting actually we've had 2 open public meetings since our last council meeting. The first was July 23rd, where the main objective of that meeting was we decided to create a web page devoted to Page Park, including all information that we have, all objective information, filings with the DPS, the whole gamut. It is now it's been drafted. I'll say we're testing it. The Communications Committee has received the draft link to that. And I have to say, anybody who knows me knows I have high standards and I don't give false flattery. So, Jason, you have done a fantastic job. I really appreciate it. You listened to what the committee had in mind and you put it all together. And I think once it is live, the community will really appreciate it. Thank you. We had another meeting, August 1st, that was a virtual meeting with Chris Allen, who was at the time the acting director of the Commercial Building Construction Division of DPS, Department of Permitting Services. The purpose of that meeting was to help understand the permitting process for Page Park and to help our understanding of what were possibilities to put on the new web page. Unfortunately, we didn't get a recording of it, but I gather there's sort of an informal recording of that meeting. If anybody would like to hear it, please contact Julian or Jason. Thank you.
Councilwoman Solt, my recollection from the last council meeting was that in the preparation, and I guess this goes to the village manager also, that it was both the Parks and Grounds Committee and the Communications Committee that was going to get together to prepare materials for the website, and I wonder whether that happened and whether the Parks and Grounds folks have seen what was proposed or what is proposed and what's drafted right now.
I'm glad you asked that. To be clear, the Communications Committee has received the link. I've asked them to review, to give okay by the end of this week. After that, it would be forwarded to Parks for your review, approval, suggestions, all that. So I would hopefully expect that on Monday to the Parks Committee. Is that clear enough?
Well, I think so.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that Parks and Grounds, that was supposed to be preparing this website and preparing the materials jointly with the Communications Committee at the direction of the council, that's the process that's being followed, and it sounds like that's what is about to happen.
Well, I would say that almost all the information and documents were available to the staff. So the staff put these on the draft site for review. So, I mean, I don't know what you mean by joint, but there's a lot of material there and it can still be revised.
Yeah, there were,
Okay.
I think there were, if my recollection is correct, there were 2 suggestions made. One was that the chair of Parks and Grounds and the chair of Communications get together, and the other was that the 2 committees could assemble together in some fashion to do some thinking and designing. but thank you for your response. Move on to the Personnel Committee meeting of August 12th. Mayor White.
The Personnel Committee met via Zoom with Mr. Joshua Hutton, and he went over the staff compensation study page by page. We asked quite a few questions of him, and the decision was made that the Personnel Committee would convene again to continue going through the study.
Thank you. Report on the Parks and Grounds Committee meeting is presently without a chair. Councilman Orr, are you presenting the report?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that on behalf of both of us.
Thanks.
I'm pleased to report, actually, that in light of the manager's report earlier, a lot of the substance of that meeting has kind of been mooted by the progress of DPS and the village and kind of making advancements and identifying next steps after the inspection. But in light of the expected pace and in the interest of kind of baselining general information, we, with a quorum of the committee, got together with the village manager to just kind of talk through three main areas. The status of the permit at the time, so this was a couple of weeks ago, and anticipated next steps, so we could kind of pre-position some information and some thoughts in advance of the permit being returned, which, as the village manager reported, has happened. Fortunately, we had a little bit better information even walking into the room, information about the scheduling of the inspection the village manager described. We also wanted to talk just a little bit about the status of the stormwater study, just to understand where the RFP was, for us to understand and to communicate publicly where the RFP was, what the responses looked like, and just kind of have a general sense of once the permit came back and we understood where we were headed, how we could act on that information. And then finally, we had a very high-level discussion about outstanding potential costs. So I think some of that may come up later tonight, but also understanding costs associated with and the range of potential costs for the stormwater plan, and just getting our arms around where we need to be thinking about money going forward. It was an informational meeting only. We didn't take any substantive votes. It was just mostly to sort of for us to get a handle on the flow of information. We also provided an opportunity for public discussion, and so we had some pretty robust public discussion questions that some we were able to answer, and gave the community the opportunity to express some policy preferences as the plan evolves. And as Julian said, we were able, even following that meeting, getting a report on the pre-construction inspection. We were able to talk a little, knowing that inspection was coming, we were also able to talk a little bit about the available documents and what we needed to have organized walking into that. And it sounds like that came across pretty successfully. So looking forward to future discussion about decisions made out of the Parks and Grounds Committee and getting back to full strength.
Thanks very much. Report on the ad hoc shuttle bus committee meeting. Mayor White.
The committee met on September 5th, and due to what they perceived as limitations in the sample buses, I believe we have narrowed down the choices to RMA and Atlantic. And the non-council members on the committee were unanimous in their support of RMA. However, the two proposals, one from RMA and one from Atlantic, do not really match up. We can't really compare apples to apples. So we are asking both companies to go back and make sure that what they are bidding on is really consistent across both companies. And we will convene again to look at the revised proposals.
Thank you, Mayor White. Report from the Climate Change and Environment Committee. Councilmember Solt.
Thank you. I'll let you know when to get up, Chris. The village is really very fortunate to have this committee, and it's really different than most of the other committees that you hear reports about. It is not comprised of 3 council members, like many committees are. It's comprised of residents, and the committee as a whole decides what to do. The members choose their own chairman. Patricia Canessa, who's in the audience now, has done a really fantastic job as chairman of the committee. If there's anyone either listening online or here that is interested in the environment or climate change, I would urge them to reach out to us. It would be great to have new people, and no one who's expressed an interest has been denied participation in the committee. And later today, later in this meeting, there's going to be a vote on hopefully a new member that I think would be a great addition. So to be clear, my role is liaison for this committee to assist them and to be an interface with the council and to help in any way I can. So if you allow me to share just a few initiatives, and then we'll have one of our members talk about something else. We are trying to participate in a program called Sustainable Maryland. It was created in 2012 by the Environmental Finance Center at the University of Maryland. The program offers assistance in developing and implementing environmental projects suitable to the particular communities that apply and participate. And importantly, it helps fund those initiatives, and it leads up to a certification. The goal of the program is to help municipalities, as they say, go green, save money, and sustain their quality of life over the long term. So there's a huge number of possible projects and programs, one of which I thought some members of the community would be interested in is a program on pet waste. There's a program, I'm just throwing some out, insect hotels, a green purchasing policy, and many, many more. But for the Village of Friendship Heights, there's a hitch. The program is limited to municipalities in Maryland, and the Village of Friendship Heights is an unincorporated taxing district. I'm fairly certain that the people who created the program didn't even know that we existed outside the realm of what their program envisioned. But with the help of the managers, we've requested that the Board of Directors of Sustainable Maryland make an exception to allow the village to participate in the program. This is being considered at the next board meeting, which is, as I understand it, later this month. Further, thank you, Julianne, the village manager, has arranged a meeting with the Director of Sustainable Maryland on October 7th, where we can learn about, again, our possibilities for participating in the program, but equally importantly, some funding opportunities that may be available for environmental and climate change projects, even if we, if we don't qualify for the formal program. Another matter, I'd like to just reiterate what the mayor said about the Goodwill truck. We initiated this effort because many people in the community complained that they could not easily recycle their used electronics and, like old computer screens and so forth, and it was too difficult to get out to Gaithersburg where they would be safely recycled. So as we all know, the less we put in the landfill and the more that gets recycled, that's better for the environment. So thank you for the managers for helping get that truck to come here on Saturday. Now, a member of our committee, Chris Nauer, is going to share a program with the rest of us. Since September is National Preparedness Month, and in our committee, we're calling it many months of preparedness. If Chris, if you could share our program idea?
Chris,
Yes.
if you'd take just a few minutes to present the idea. Thanks.
Yes, I'll try to be, can you hear me first of all?
Yes.
Because I'm pretty short. Okay, yes, I had given Julian a couple of slides, or maybe you're looking at them right now. It is National Preparedness Month. For FEMA has, in Maryland, the state of Maryland, over the years has declared this month, because I think it's the month of hurricanes, et cetera, to be every year to be National Preparedness Month. Our committee has discussed this for quite a long time. And we've been watching more and more severe weather events, which are obviously due to climate change, that affect members of our village. We are very concerned about especially our elderly residents and those with young children who live in these 15-story buildings, about what would happen to them if there was a severe weather event. So I'll talk just a little bit about that. We live in a relatively safe village. Our power lines are buried under the ground. We're not in a hurricane zone generally, but there are some dangers that still we could possibly face. So I'm including, for instance, high winds, not a hurricane, but maybe a tornado, or a derecho, or one of those things, drought, the lowering of the water in the Potomac. Is that water safe to drink? And if you get a boil water advisory like they've had in DC, what should you do if you're an elderly person living on the 15th floor in the Elizabeth, for instance? What would you do? We're talking about flooding, which would probably seem kind of laughable to people at the top of the hill, but those of us who live in Willard Towers, it's not so funny, because we're at the very bottom of the hill. The creek is right behind our building. If we get a 20-inch rainfall, which can happen and has happened in Maryland, what do we do, and how do we plan for our residents' safety if something like that happens? So we're talking really on a large scale. We're not talking about individual homes in Somerset where you just put in a little bit of water or whatever, you have the police come and help you out. No, we've got 5,000 residents in this village, and they could be at risk if any of these things happen. So what we have learned is that most Friendship Heights buildings have little or no emergency plans for external threats. They may have a little fire drill, they may have something else, but as far as external threats, there are almost no plans in place in any of the buildings. National and local responders, such as fire department, police department, FEMA, will not be there on this large scale to assist us if something happens. FEMA's job is to come in afterwards and, clean things up and give you a loan. The local responders would be overwhelmed if they tried to help even one of the buildings. And our chairman has actually visited the firefighters, local firefighters, and police department to see if they have any plans for evacuation or assistance or anything to high-rise buildings. They do not. So we can't call 911 and expect them to come and help us in the case of this kind of emergency. So what do we do? Do we have a meeting here in the village like we have had in the past, telling residents to come and speak to someone from emergency management? That doesn't work, because we've had them in the past and 20 people show up. But we're a village of 5,000 people, so we're not reaching people by saying, come up the hill to a meeting about emergency preparedness. That is a no-go. It doesn't work. So our idea was to plan meetings in each individual building on emergency preparedness. You have homeowners associations in the condos. We have a very active tenants association in Willard Towers to prepare a program for management and any interested residents about emergency preparedness, and find out, first of all, what do they have in place? Do they have any plans in place for the woman on the 15th floor in a wheelchair, or the young person who's got 2 kids on the 14th floor and the elevators are out? What is their plan? So we're going to put together a program. We're starting at the Carlton at Council members Schultz, Martha's suggestion, because it's a small building, very active owners, and we think that would be a good place to start our pilot project. It's still a work in progress. We haven't decided exactly what we're going to emphasize, but we think this is something that's very lacking in our community, and with the attention paid to Preparedness Month, I think this is a good time to do it. So we'll be doing this in the future.
Thanks.
So, any questions?
Thanks very much, Ms. Nauer.
No? Okay.
Yep. Yeah. The report from the Red House Working Group, Council Member R.
Thank you. Good news to report, I think. First off, I want to start by thanking Cheryl and Roy and Jason and Julian. We spent a good deal of time over the last several weeks working with our attorney to develop a draft lease agreement, building off of the prospective tenant's proposal and some of our discussions about village interests. We just this afternoon received, we spent several hours last week going through the draft lease, sent a number of questions and proposed some alternative language. The attorney reacted to those and sent back what we think is a near final draft of the lease, which will then go to the tenant for their reactions. The goal is to receive their reactions to the proposed language. The lease is about 40 pages. To receive their reactions to the draft lease, and then bring any outstanding issues to the full council with recommendations in the hopes that we can resolve final language, the 7 of us can resolve final language in order to get the lease signed, which we understand is really only the beginning of the process. In parallel, we've been having some discussions about preparing for our construction work, the ADA work. We understand that in addition to identifying the appropriate contractor to do the work on our behalf, we want to have a good understanding of the permitting process as well as the state and national obligations for accessibility compliance. So we've already started collecting that information at the county and state level, and are putting some of that into our thinking around the appropriate contractor to perform those services. We're also starting to help the prospective tenant think about their permitting obligations, both for construction and for operation. The goal was to get the draft lease agreement out of our hands for the tenant's reactions, and then to turn the sort of red house energy toward permitting and construction, as the tenant won't be able to really take possession of the property until all of our construction work is done.
Great, thank you. That takes us into old business, and it's the third bullet, which is the discussion vote on the Page Park Stormwater Management Concept Proposals. Village Manager Mansfield.
Yeah, so earlier this year, I think it was about 6 months ago, we were advised by the county DPS that we are required to develop a stormwater management plan for Page Park. And this is because the area of disturbed soil related to the project exceeds 5,000 square feet on the site, which is the threshold that triggers the requirement to do a stormwater management plan. And basically that's to develop a concept plan to deal with excess water runoff on the site from the addition of hardscape impervious surfaces on the site that were not there with the previous version of the park. And so there's going to be extra water runoff that has to be basically accounted for and planned for, with most likely some type of structure or facility to be installed on the site as a result of the stormwater management plan. So, and this requires a civil engineer. So we initially reached out to A. Morton Thomas, which is an engineering firm that we've used many times, and they contacted the DPS person who's in charge of this and got basically all the information that they would need, and they submitted a proposal to us which required us to go out for bids. We proceeded to go out for bids, and we received 8 proposals. With a typical wide range of numbers that we've seen. As it happens, the low bid is a particularly well-recommended firm, Clark Azar and Associates, initially recommended to us by our attorney, Ron Bolt, and also very well recommended by Town of Chevy Chase. They did basically the same thing for a park in the Town of Chevy Chase, developed a stormwater management plan and dealt with DPS. Also another local municipality, Chevy Chase Section 5, has used them, and Chevy Chase Section 3 has used them. And we're very big fans of Jason Azar and Clark Azar and Associates. So we met with them on site, and they submitted a bid which happens to be the low bid, so we are recommending them. It was a little bit difficult to track these proposals and develop a chart. Some of the bidders came in and included some other items and some things that were not completely in the original scope and things that they thought would be required by DPS. There's a little bit of leeway with DPS potentially coming back and saying, we want this instead of that, and potentially changing the scope of work. But we thought it was at least good to have somebody on hand to start doing this, as this work will be required separate from the other inspection points that I mentioned earlier.
So you're recommending Clark Azar and Associates?
Right, which is $28,000 is the cost.
So for the purposes of discussion, is there a motion from a council member to accept this recommendation? Yes, Councilmember Measy has moved to accept the proposal from Clark Azar and Associates, and Councilmember R has seconded that motion. So we're open for discussion. Are there comments that anyone would like to make?
So I think this is the right answer. We took a look at it, and we've been talking a little bit about our obligations. I will say, I think based on the uncertainty that the village manager has identified, I think we'll want to pay special attention to the provisions in the contract that speak to compliance with DPS requirements, and sort of, I think we want to be explicit about, similar to some lessons we've learned in other recent contracts, things like negotiating change orders, how we agree on shared costs associated with DPS imposed changes to the project. So I think, however, wherever we end up here, I think the next step should be to take the approved proposal, perhaps empower the village manager and maybe the Parks and Grounds Committee to work with our attorney to ensure that we've got the appropriate provisions in our contract with them so they can start the work, recognizing that it's likely to change a little bit over time. So I support the recommended actor, but I do think we want to talk and think a little bit about how we structure the contract.
Thank you. Other council members? Yes, Councilmember Salt.
I'm assuming I got this name right. You mentioned a Morton Thomas, is that right? And could you tell me who this person is? Did I get the name right?
Yeah, A. Morton Thomas.
Oh, well.
That's the name of the firm.
Okay. And?
It's a civil engineer that we have used for other projects in the past. So they were the first ones that we reached out to. We haven't really worked with another engineering firm.
I guess my question is sort of, how was this RFP developed, and who provided the requirements to you?
It was developed from a proposal from A. Morton Thomas after they spoke to DPS and got the requirements.
Okay, and they are not a bidder?
They are a bidder.
So a bidder wrote the RFP?
Correct.
And the reason we think that the RFP meets DPS's requirements is because of consultation with A. Morton
Yeah, they
Thomas.
reached out to the main, the DPS inspector who's in charge of stormwater. They also consulted the website, which we were advised to do. There's a stormwater website, management concept website that indicates what types of things you need to include in your plan.
So you don't really have a policy that a firm that writes the RFP is permitted to bid on it? Isn't that a little bit of a conflict?
I don't see that necessarily. We've had that with contractors doing work on how, for instance, the Red House, we had an initial proposal from a contractor that we used to develop the RFP because they identified the scope of work, including some very detailed information on how the compliance items should be done, which we would not have known to include otherwise.
So, my concern is, like, how do we know these are the right things, for the purpose of DPS? And I think Dan was providing kind of some ideas to help protect that, I have no problem with the vendor you're recommending. I think they have an excellent reputation and lots of qualifications and so forth. But if we could make sure we put in the contract protections to the village where, if this scope of work is not complete, that they have to do these other things, hopefully at their own cost? Or how do we address that the RFP may not be sufficient for DPS purposes? Because I don't want to approve something that I don't know for sure is right unless we have contract language that kind of addresses that.
Council Member Tyler?
I understand where you're coming from, Martha, and also Councilman R made it very clear, and that is something that the Red House Committee has really talked about in depth, is in the writings with the attorney in the documents, is that we have the verbiage that talks about additional charges, how negotiations and the ability to be able to negotiate, those all have to be stated and should be stated in any contract we do going forward. And let the attorney give us the correct verbiage for that. You will never have anything, and I hate to say nevers, but you will never have a foolproof contract that is going to cover everything that you can think of. You had 90 million pages, as our lease that we're presenting is 40 pages. And we still are leaving room for the ability for cost increases. How do we handle that? That's the verbiage that you get from the attorney to make sure it is properly input in the contract, as well as how do we say something that covers us better than we've ever been covered before. And I know that may not be the solid answer that you're looking for, because there is no foolproof language, but we work with our attorneys who specialize in these kind of contracts to give us the best language that will protect us as much as possible.
Yes, Councilmember Sol.
I'm aware of that, but can we add this provision that we will be negotiating these extra provisions as part of the motion?
That's what he said.
Well, that's not the motion I got. It was
Yeah,
separate
that would be my
proposal.
recommendation, right?
Okay,
I would.
could I get the language again? I've got
Well,
to
it-
accept the proposal for storm water concept from Azar, and what else?
I mean, I'm happy to give some language. Mr. Measy's motion, I think, is still
Oh, I'm sorry,
open.
easy, okay.
I have no objection to the sentiment that Daniel is suggesting, but I'm not sure we need that in the motion. We accept the thing, and we're asking the village manager in consultation with our attorney to negotiate some specifics into the bid. And I think we do stuff like that, or should be doing stuff like that all the time. So I'm not sure it's required in the motion.
And sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I guess the only thing I would say is, if,
The sense of the council is
I think that's right.
quite clear, and so, you know,
as long as the council's comfortable, I think, and I'm open to input from the village manager as well. I think the sort of give and take between council members and village staff, as we've negotiated some of these other agreements, has been helpful. And so as long as the council is comfortable with a smaller subset of council members working with the village manager to kind of make some of the first order policy decisions that might come up, thresholds or other, you know, we have the three of us, in using the Red House as an example, have had to sort of, well, I think this is a reasonable number. I think that's kind of unfair to put on the village staff, since it reflects the expenditures of our money and sort of overarching policy decisions that we're here to make. So I'd be fine with whatever motion empowers some discrete subset of us. I don't think it's a 7-person project. I don't think we're going to make any progress if we try and do it that way. But that empowers some subset of us to speak on behalf of the larger group for early negotiation. So whether that's an amendment to the motion or just an acknowledgement by the council of that, I'm fine either way.
Councilmember Measy, anything?
No, I think I understood what Dan just said. So, you know, if it's the sense of the council, I think that's fine. I don't think we had a special motion to empower the Red House Committee to make these various discussions and to do these things. It was part of the committee's responsibility, and so I think we're doing the same thing here.
So,
But, you know, do what you like.
so as I understand the motion, it is to approve Clark Azar and Associates and authorize the village manager to work with council members and other people to negotiate any specifics necessary. Yes, village manager Mansfield.
Council members in specific, Parks and Grounds Committee, or a separate working group, or what are we, what's
This
the
relates to
sense?
Parks and Grounds, I think. So I think you can work with members of Parks and Grounds Committee on this to the extent that's
Okay.
necessary. Does everybody understand the motion?
Yeah.
And is that consistent? First, Councilmember Mizzi with your motion and the support from Council?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. And then for the purpose of the minutes,
I just need the last few words. What I have here is, I guess I should have this on. It is on, okay. To approve the proposal for the stormwater concept from this Azar
Azar
Company
Associates, yeah.
and authorize the village manager to work with
with members of Parks and Grounds.
members of Parks and Grounds.
And other expertise as necessary.
And other,
To reach final contract agreement.
to reach final contract agreement.
Council Member Schaefer?
I have a quick question. Do we know if Clark Azar has done this in Montgomery County? This specific?
Yeah, I just mentioned that in my preamble. They just did this in the town of Chevy Chase for basically the same thing. They did the stormwater management concept.
Okay, I thought, because I know it talked about a field, I didn't know what, it was the.
No, it was a
storm-
park
okay.
renovation, yeah.
Right.
And the other municipalities that they worked in as well. Yeah, they've got very good experience with the county.
Are there other comments? Village Manager Mansfield, if I may, just items to be considered as you're working through the concept with Azar, which I agree is the right one too. But in looking at the other proposals, there were some elements that, in those proposals, that might be considered for our contract as well. First, specific reference to the specific Montgomery County regulations that they're going to use to apply to their work. Second, that there be sufficient rounds of review built in. Other proposals seem to anticipate, as we found with the park and anticipate with the Red House, working with county officials, that we will go back and forth several times. Some of the other proposals suggested that specifically they will do all those rounds. We don't want to get caught short. Third, that they do plan to submit their materials through the Montgomery County Department of Permitting Services e-plan system. We've had one complication with that already with Page Parks. We want to make sure we don't have that. Third, it wasn't clear to me in their proposal, but it was specifically stated in other proposals that they will assume some project management responsibility. So that would need to be made clear. They list this forest conservation exemption for an additional $4,500. I'm not sure that's needed or not. They say yes, but we may want to clear that up ahead of time. Other proposals gave a very specific time to complete the project, so we probably want to have that in our contract. There was a question in a process that was described as off-site watershed evaluation, and that was listed in another proposal. I don't know whether that's needed or not, but since we are bordering a watershed area through the creek, we may want to make sure we know what has to be done there. Another proposal suggested that, or said, they told us where the work would be performed. There were questions about traffic and some other things, so I guess we're anticipating that the work would be performed in the park itself. Others suggested how long it would take to complete the project. The one that gave the most detailed time frame, we're talking, I think, 5 to 7 weeks. So that would be important to know so that we can let the public anticipate when this work will be done so that we can go the next step. And then some stated specifically that there could be other reimbursable expenses. What those might be, you might want to clear that up in the contract as well. So with that, seeing no other further comments, there's
No,
been a...
Excuse,
Yep,
excuse,
okay.
could I was going to say, other than that, you have no questions at all.
No.
Could you email me those in writing? I scribbled some notes,
I'd be
but,
happy to do
and let me just say the one thing I heard you said was about where the work will be done on site. Pretty much all the bidders that came out on site said the work is going to be done in the grassy area, kind of on the lower part of the site, where it'll either be some type of drainage structure or some type of like water treatment tank or facility that would be buried in the ground, but it would logically be in the grassy area that's behind the main slab patio.
Okay. Councilmember Sullivan?
Along the lines of what Julian was asking about, are you offering suggestions or these directions?
I'm suggesting that these may be issues to be addressed in the contract.
In the
That
contract.
leave it up to the
Okay.
judgment of the village manager and consulting with
Yeah.
other.
Thank you. I
people.
appreciate that detail because we need details to protect ourselves.
Sure.
Yeah.
With that, there's a motion on the floor. Everybody understand the motion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. The motion carries. Okay.
Yes.
Abstain. Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Abstain. That motion carries. That takes us to a discussion of the Public Safety Committee's off-duty police report. Councilman R., at the end of our July meeting, asked whether there would be an opportunity to discuss anything in the report. There are a set of recommendations, but there's nothing that has come forward for the council to approve at this point. So council members have had the month of the time since July to look through the report. We've heard some comments about it in this session and others, but let me turn it over to Council Member Tyler.
First, I'd like to thank the committee members of the Public Safety Committee, and Julian and Jason. This is a very busy committee on a lot of different things, and I'll say 99.9% of the work that comes to the committee comes from outside of the committee. It comes from residents, it comes from the police, it doesn't come from us, it comes from outside to us to look into. The report was a labor of love by our former lead of the public safety group, Captain Coquinos, who is no longer with us and has moved on and is replaced by a new person, which all of you have seen and met before, Lieutenant Ari. And I never say his last name right. But I'd like to thank the mayor and Melanie and the council chair, Bobby. We each played an integral part in working on this report along with Captain Coquinos, and we delve into the numbers and stats that he gave us, which we too were very surprised at seeing what came out of his study. And the study was based on him capturing all this work for that first year that this program has been in effect. And we, as it was stated, the group made recommendations at the end of what we'd like to see go forward. It's very hard to give a lot of stats that people throw out and would like to know when this program has only been in effect at that time that report was done, only a year. So you don't have anything to compare with. You're just now gathering information. So with some of those recommendations, a lot of these recommendations, in fact, are in progress, and we are moving forward. There's a lot of things that go on all the time that aren't necessarily reported to the community, but it's for the committee's knowledge. And over accumulation of time, another report will be done, and we'll have more information on things that we gather over the year. But at this point, if anybody has any questions, we're happy to answer them.
So let me see, recognize any council members that would like to make a comment or ask a question. Councilman Orr?
So is this product the sort of final consolidated version of a public safety committee report delivered for educational purposes at this point? You said that some of these recommendations, we have already started to implement some of these recommendations. Do you envision this report leading to specific actions presented for the council to act on? Or was this really just sort of a, here's how the last year went? I noticed there's a few things in here about prospective. You know, we have more data, we'll know better. Maybe we could spend some money at the end of the year to organize the data differently. Are all of the next actions that we might be asked to weigh in on further down the road? So this is sort of a closed book for the moment. Is that?
You summed it up correctly. Okay. This is, and some people would say, is this an executive summary or whatever industry you come from? This is a year-end report of our first year with this partnership, and we wanted to show a culmination of everything that was found and recorded and presented to us, and we put together this information to share with the public as to what's going on in the community. And as I said, a lot of the things what we talked about, we came up with recommendations to look at for the future. And if there are recommendations that come from the council that said, is it possible for us to look at X, Y, and Z? We'll go back and find out if we're able to capture certain information that you may want to know. There's some things that I've asked, I had asked Captain Kokinos about particular situations that have occurred, particular events that have occurred, and because of knowing that world, there's some things they can't necessarily disclose. And as you know, as an attorney, there's a lot that you can say, but you can't really get into the specifics of it. So this is basically an information so that we can let people know what really has gone on the year that we were working with the police.
Yes, Councilmember Solt and then Councilmember Mazie.
I will be presenting my reactions and response next month to this report, but I do wonder about recommendations that have already been implemented and wondering whether the council should have weighed in on those.
It's not I would not use the word implemented. There are recommendations that we, for example, number 2, for example, to seek to make more residents aware of officer deployment and their satisfaction and suggestions for improving the program. If you want us to vote on asking residents that, we can, but
you did say implemented, but I'm just, and I don't know what those are and what, perhaps you can share that maybe next month, what has been implemented in your recommendations.
And that's why I just said implementation may have been the wrong word.
Okay.
Councilmember Mazie?
Yeah. A couple of questions. first of all, this is an extraordinary report, probably the most comprehensive report I've seen in my time on the council, so thank you for this. Just as a matter of curiosity, was the report written by the committee, or is it a joint effort, or who's the author? The author is?
As stated earlier, the report, a lot of the stats and all that data and information came from Captain Coquinos, who
Right.
wrote a report with us. And then the three of us on the committee worked to put more information involved in it.
Right.
So we all worked together
And
worked as a team and worked with the captain.
Oh, because it's written in one voice, which is terrific when so many people are involved. I just had one small question. I had thought when this thing began that for some reason the officers were not allowed to do foot patrols through the community. I knew they weren't allowed to circulate with their cars, but I thought as well that they were not allowed to do foot patrols. Am I wrong about that? Because I think foot patrols would be a terrific addition to this.
You are correct. They're not. There are certain guidelines in accordance not only with Montgomery County Police, but also with the Fraternal Order of Police, that when a off-duty police officer is working, they have to adhere to certain guidelines, policies, and procedures that are set forth for them. As a result, the village cannot mandate or require an off-duty police officer to do things that are not allowed within the FOP. What we do work with is that we work with their lead person now, different person, but the same thing. We tell them where we have issues, what's going on. They tell us where the issues are, what's going on, and we try to work together to see how we can put the language together to get them to do some of the things that we would like to be done without violating the FOP nor Montgomery County requirements.
But the answer then is they don't do foot patrols now.
Exactly. You cannot do a patrol in a off-duty capacity.
Because I thought it's referenced here.
It's referenced there, but it is not, in reading the 50-page FOP, it is very strict in the language. And so we are working with them to figure out how to incorporate some of our concerns, requests, and staying within the guidelines that they are not in violation, and neither are we forcing them to be in violation. And a good example of that is something came to us today on, excuse me, I had it out. The attempted auto theft Friday night, and then thefts in parking lot, garages, and license plates stolen from a Jeep out here on Hills Plaza last night. How they can do that without doing foot patrol is how they work it out. We may say, can you give us an idea of what's going on in your day-to-day operation of how you do the work here? We can put that in a request. How their supervisor determines how it's mandated, that's on them.
It's interesting because obviously, the traditional view is that one of the best law enforcement crime deterrence thing is the cop on the beat. And it would be nice, I was hoping that we could get something like that, but you say we really can't.
You can, but you can't, because it's how it's written. They are out, they are seen, they are walking around. They do have the car positioned in certain places, and they rotate the car around. But can we say, these are the requirements you have to do while you're being off duty? No, we can't say that. But we're working with them. They're great partners, so we're working with them to figure out how to make sure things are worked out the way. And I think they've done a good job in coming back. We got a great breakdown on the incident that happened down the street. Everybody knows it was, you can read 50 million different assumptions and statements, but as Jason put out the information on the emergency alert, it was because of the constant communication that was going on.
Mayor White?
Thank you. I think now's a good time, Cheryl, to remind everyone that there will be a safety workshop on September 30th, kind of like a safety town hall for all residents. And as I read through this report again, there was one paragraph that I think really underscores a lot of what the Public Safety Committee is focusing on in the village and why we are working so closely with our off-duty police officers. And I know it's getting late, but I'm going to read this one paragraph. The village rests within the Montgomery County Police Department's Edward 1 sector. That's the name they give to us. That sector's boundaries run roughly along Western Avenue from MacArthur Boulevard to Wisconsin Avenue, from Wisconsin Avenue up Wisconsin Ave, I'm sorry, from Western Avenue up Wisconsin Avenue to Bradley Boulevard, west on Bradley Boulevard to River Road, out River Road to 495, and back out to MacArthur Boulevard. Only one officer and vehicle are assigned to Edward 1 sector. So when people say, well, I called the police and it took them forever to get here, this is one of the reasons why. And when Officer Kokinos explained this to us, I was just flabbergasted. I had no idea. I've lived here for over 40 years, and I have no idea that that is our current police situation. So out of this report, I think that's one of the most important paragraphs.
Are there other comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. Mayor White. Mayor White, the appointment of the chair of the Parks and Grounds Committee.
Councilman Measy has worked with the staff in Green Sweep to secure the permit for Page Park, and with that task accomplished, he asked to step away from the committee. I, along with the chairman, would like to thank Mr. Measy for his work on the Parks and Grounds Committee. We are indebted to you for your service, and thank you for all you've done. The mayor appoints the committee members and the chairman, and I would do this in 2 steps this evening. For the new committee member, I am nominating Chairman Pestrunk to fill the spot left vacant by Councilman Measy.
That's been a motion. Is there support for that motion? Council Member Tyler supports the motion. Is there discussion?
I'd just like to say, this period of transition, I'd like to thank Mr. Measy as well as a relatively new member of the council, and with kind of getting thrown right into Page Park and the Parks and Grounds work. I appreciate the patience and the time you invested in kind of bringing me up to speed. So thank you very much.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. I will be abstaining. Would you like to call the roll?
Yeah. R,
Yes.
R4, Measy? Yes. Measy 4, Schaefer?
4.
Schaefer 4, Sold 4, Tyler?
Yes.
Tyler 4, White?
Yes.
White 4, thank you.
And then to continue, I am nominating Council Chair Pestrunk as the chair of the Parks and Grounds Committee. Just briefly, the Parks and Grounds Committee really has a greater task than what they've been allowed to focus on the last few years. They've been sort of preoccupied with Page Park. But really, Parks and Grounds covers the entire village. And there have been times when I think that committee has had more time to focus on the bigger picture of our entire village. And I think Bobby would do an excellent job as chair, and I am making that nomination.
Is there support for that nomination?
I'll second it.
Councilmember Tyler supports. Is there discussion?
I have my hand raised.
Yes. Councilmember Salt.
I'm concerned about this. I believe that we have a new council member, Daniel R., who's highly competent. He's an attorney. He does not fill the role of chairman for any other committee. He's served on this committee. He's been a great contributor. I see absolutely no legitimate reason why he should not be nominated as the chairman of this committee.
Further comments? Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah, so well, I'm going to echo a lot of what Martha said, and I supported Chairman Pestrang's appointment to the committee. I voted for it. I also want to point out I have voted 100% with all the recommendations Mayor White has made for committee members, for chairman, but I'm not supporting this, and it's not personal, but I want to explain why. As Councilmember Selt said, Councilman R. is already a member of the Parks Committee. He's been on since May. He's attended all the public meetings. He's had multiple conversations with staff and with me as the other Parks Committee member, how to administer our contract. He's an attorney. We all agree that the lack of legal expertise on this contract has been sorely needed. He ran the last Parks Committee meeting that we had. He gave the presentation today. So I don't understand the logic behind this nomination to chairman, especially when it means we're departing from two very long-standing policies. And by long-standing, I don't mean this council, I mean previous councils. The first is that when a chairmanship vacancy opens up, this council and prior council have always looked first to the committee to fill the vacancy from a remaining council member. And I'll give an example. When Councilmember Durbin passed, Mayor White's suggestion for chairman was an existing committee member, Councilmember Measy. That passed unanimously. So we are breaking with that tradition, which is a good one. And we're breaking with that tradition to break with another one, which is that we have always distributed the chairmanships. And we do it for two reasons. We do it to distribute the work, and we do it, quite frankly, to distribute the power. And Chairman Pestrang is not only the chairman of the council, chairman of another committee. This would be the third chairmanship. That's a lot of power, quite frankly, to concentrate on one person while passing over an existing committee member who has no chairmanship. So I don't understand why we're just not doing what we've normally done on multiple fronts to make this appointment. So all I can say is, and again, it's not, I think there's just an inherent unfairness here. It's a lopsided concentration of power. It's very, very troubling, the logic behind this nomination. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, there is a motion on the floor. It's been seconded. Call for the vote. Will all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign.
Nay.
Aye.
And I'll do the roll call.
Okay.
So R,
I'm going to abstain.
abstain. Measy?
Yes.
Measy 4. Schaefer?
No.
Schaefer, no. Salt, no. Tyler?
Yes.
Tyler, 4. White?
Yes.
White, 4. And Pestrang?
4.
Pestrang, 4.
Motion carries. Move on to the nomination of Tom Brody to the Ad Hoc Committee on Climate Change and Environment. This is Mayor White. Thank you.
Just to say a few words regarding Mr. Brody. He is a resident of Willard Towers, and I am nominating him to be added to the Ad Hoc Committee on Climate Change and Environment. He has a long history of interest in environmental and climate issues. He has a PhD in immunology from Berkeley and has done postdoctoral work on viral structure at Stanford and additional postdoctoral work at Oxford. I would say he's more than qualified.
There's been a motion by the mayor to nominate Tom Brody to the Ad Hoc Committee on Climate Change and Environment. Is there support for that?
Second. Mhm.
Councilmember Salt supports. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Moving on.
Oh, I'll do a roll call. R.
Yes.
R4, Maisie. Maisie 4, Schaefer.
Yes.
Schaefer 4, Salt 4, Tyler 4, White.
Yes.
I'm sorry, 4, and Pastrana
Abstain.
is abstain. Thank
The
you.
last item under new business and on the council agenda tonight is a discussion and vote on approving Page Park invoice from Green Sweep for $4,000. Village Manager Mansfield.
Green Sweep has submitted this invoice along with an email from the president of the company, Kyle Narsavage, explaining what the invoice was for. It's a $4,000 invoice for their structural engineer to prepare code checks and calculations for the Page Park railings, and including his work to prepare signed and sealed drawings. And they submitted the invoice from the engineer that backed up their invoice to us. So I included that in the packet for the council, along with the settlement agreement, or I should say the amendment to the agreement from the original contract from September of last year, which includes a paragraph about change orders and how change orders are supposed to be basically the process for handling change orders, which is that they're presented to the council for approval.
Is there a motion to support the village manager's recommendation? Councilmember Maisy, is there a second for that?
Second.
Mayor White has supported the recommendation. The motion, is there discussion? Councilmember Salt.
I guess that's it. I find this invoice very strange. So the original work, as presented here, was performed by the engineer Don Fang, who was subsequently fired by Green Sweep. And to my knowledge, the work was not used for the permit application. The engineer's invoice to Green Sweep was dated May 2023. The contract addendum was signed in September 2023, before the invoice was forwarded to us. That was forwarded to us in June 2024, about 9 months after the contract addendum was signed. So the contract addendum says the contractor is responsible, the contract addendum says the contractor is responsible to undertake at contractor's cost the work necessary to comply with DPS. It also says a change order must be agreed upon in advance. That didn't happen. So what's the point of having an addendum if we just ignore it? I think we are not required to pay this invoice, and I don't think we should.
Other discussion?
Yes. Sure. So let me give a little background into how this got before us. We received a few weeks ago our normal landscaping bill for August, and the bill was fine. The amount was fine, but on the landscaping invoice, they said that this $4,000 was a pass-through amount. Now, you should not be commingling. These are two very separate contracts, the park contract, the landscaping contract. They should not be including park expenses on the landscaping contract, and especially saying it's already due when it wasn't. So what happened is I refused to sign the check, And that sort of set this all off. There was some legal discussions, which I guess I can't talk about. But the bigger problem is one, as Councilmember Salt mentioned, they never came in for a change order. One. Number two, they had this invoice before the addendum was negotiated. And the bigger concern to me is we know, and we talked about this earlier, there are a lot of change orders coming, multiple. And to start negotiating these piecemeal and paying them piecemeal, especially with our contractor's attitude that they're including it on their invoice, and when I requested taking it off the landscaping invoice, they refused. In their minds, we owe this, it was past due, we need to pay it, and I'm not sure why we're sort of buckling in and violating our addendum, violating a business practice to pay it. And one of the things we're not talking about, since this engineer was fired, there's another invoice coming for the exact same work from another engineer. We going to pay that? We're going to have a separate discussion about that? We need to sort of take a holistic view of this tsunami of change orders that are coming in and decide how we want to pay them, how we want to handle them. Maybe we have another agreement with Green Sweep, but because they sort of are insisting on getting paid, I don't understand the logic, not only of paying an invoice the way they submitted, but paying this particular invoice when there's going to be two bills for the exactly the same work. And just, again, this is the invoice for the person they fired and had to replace with another invoice. So I'm not even sure, you know, why this isn't even open for a discussion with them. Okay.
Other discussion? Village Manager Mansfield, anything to say in response to the questions?
Well, I mean, I'm not representing Green Sweep here, so I'm I mean, it's certainly up to the council what they want to do with this. I will just point out that the vast majority of the work of the signed and sealed drawings was done by Don Feng. So I don't think you're going to get another invoice for the same amount from the new engineer. Don Feng produced all of this work to do the drawings. There was a disagreement sort of late in the process as to a back and forth about, you know, some of the materials and how it was to be installed, such that the fabricator of the iron railings basically threw up his hands and said, I don't think we can, you know, finalize this with this engineer. Green Sweep decided to go get a different engineer to just finish up the drawings and get that person's signature. But basically the work had been done to develop the drawings, so I don't think you're going to get another invoice for $4,000 to basically redo everything that was already done, because it didn't have to be redone, it just had to be finished and signed.
Okay. Well, so do you know, since this invoice was submitted months before we negotiated this addendum, do you know why they didn't bring it up while we were negotiating the addendum?
Again, I mean, you're asking me to basically be
No,
Green Sweep. I'm not
asking you to
representing.
Okay,
I'm not representing Green Sweep here. So
fair enough.
Please don't ask me why Green Sweep does what they do.
Okay, let me rephrase. You weren't aware of this invoice when we were negotiating the addendum. Is that fair?
The invoice is dated June.
Right, and this addendum is signed.
We negotiated the addendum in September of 2023.
Right. So had they presented it to us?
They presented it to us in June.
They did.
June
Okay.
of which year? Julie?
This year.
Right. So the invoice predates the original invoice to Green Sweep predates the addendum, doesn't it?
This $4,000 invoice was given to us on June 17th, 2024. The addendum was September of 2023.
Right.
9 months before this invoice.
Right. Okay. So they just never made us aware of it. Is that fair to say?
Sure.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Mazie.
Julian, if you clarify this, Mr. Feng did the work for the pergola and the signed and sealed documents for the pergola. Was that billed separately, or was this part of that work? I mean, he did. His history was he did satisfactory work for which he was presumably paid for the pergola thing that got signed and sealed and everything, and then he went to work on the handrails, and that's when we had the problem in regard to the handrails, and then he handed that off to the to this second engineer.
Yeah, that's correct. If you look at the bill, there are two elements to it. The first part is the railings, and the second part is the pergola. So yeah, the pergola was done before that.
Yeah.
The pergola was done completely
And that's
without.
all part of the 4,000.
That's right, and that
So
was done completely by Don Feng without
Right.
without any controversy.
Exactly.
And that was
So-
finished. And then with the railings, then
Right.
they got into the argument about how to complete the drawings. But this invoice covers
So
both
the implication,
both sets of drawings.
the
Yeah.
implication that we're
How does
paying
this fall?
Feng, and then he was fired. We moved away for him from that very last part of the handrail thing, and he did the work and to a very satisfactory degree for the pergola thing, right?
Correct. Yes.
Thank you.
There are other conversations.
Well, yeah, I guess, and maybe,
Councilman Schaefer.
I'm sorry, and maybe Chairman Pestra can answer this question, but since you were one of the people that negotiated this addendum, but how does this fall within paragraph 10? How does this not fall outside the things that the contractor has to pay for? I'm not questioning that the work was done or done well. I'm just understanding how this paragraph 10 is consistent with us paying for it.
Yeah, so of course, it was the council that adopted this amendment, but I can share my perspective with a question to Village Manager Mansfield, if you will. I'm assuming that, at least from Green Sweep's perspective, this is the way they think that change orders should be submitted as part of a billing. And what I would suggest is that that's probably not the way we want to receive the request for change orders from them. And is it your understanding that this is the process they understood to use for change order? This could be.
Again,
You don't know.
I keep getting asked what Green Sweep does and why they do it, and I can't answer that.
Sure.
So what
I would suggest that the email from Mr. Narsavage in writing that you all have explains his thought process and potentially answers your question. But again, I'm not in a position to say what Green Sweep thinks and why they think and what they do.
So just to conclude my observation, I'd say that we may be an issue for Parks and Grounds Committee to address, which is how are we going to receive change orders from Green Sweep with the recognition that we probably will receive other ones. So I see Councilmember Salt and Councilmember Schaefer. I recognize you. Councilwoman Salt.
I would disagree that this is the way anyone established a change order process. Both parties signed this document that says a change order must be agreed upon in advance for any additional worker compensation. So to the extent anybody thinks you just provide a bill and we're supposed to pay it is not correct and not what both parties agreed to. So I really disagree with that. And while, I got the microphone here, when we do actually vote on the motion, I think would be helpful to reference the specific invoice number, because we may be getting, more of these types of things, and I want to be very, very clear about to what invoice we agree, we made our decision on, if you don't mind.
Council.
Okay, so what she said, and my question wasn't about change orders per se. My question is about what in this paragraph obligates us to pay this invoice, even if they do submit a change order. I mean, I don't see wording that, if they're responsible for undertaking at their cost work necessary to comply with applicable laws imposed by Montgomery County, that's what this invoice is for.
Yeah, I would say that language is very clear, that there's nothing that requires us to pay
Okay.
a change order because they submit it.
All right, well, thank you
And
for acknowledging that.
What's clear also
Okay.
is that as I mentioned, it would be useful to have some conversation and some feedback, if not requirement, to the Green Sweep principles about how we would, in the future, accept proposals for change orders so that we don't get caught in this bind again. Is there any further discussion? Yes, Council.
Just one observation, recognizing that the motion that we're currently discussing is to either pay or not pay this invoice. I'd recommend, if folks are amenable, considering instead, I think what you're proposing, to not make an up or down decision on this invoice at the moment, but instead to have a Parks and Grounds Committee conversation about the mechanisms for submitting change orders and potentially including this one. That's right. And based on the I think exactly correct observations of the village manager, get some of the questions being answered, some of the questions being asked rather, answered by the only party who knows what they intended. I think there's value in having a conversation with the performer and asking them some of these things that Julian isn't in a position to answer. So rather than voting this down or up right now, taking that question off the table, I think might be our best bet.
So that, there's been a suggestion to take the motion off the table. Let me see whether you'd like to do that. Councilman Mazie?
No, I think I'd rather have Dan make a motion to table it, and then we can decide. I'm not going to withdraw the motion.
Okay. Would you like to make a motion to reconsider this item as an?
Dan he wants to make a motion to table.
To table this vote pending a discussion of the Parks and Grounds Committee and recommendation.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. So is there support for that? Councilmember Schaefer has supported the motion to table the original motion. Is there discussion?
That's not a non-debatable motion.
Non-debatable motion, that's right. So is there any discussion? Just, okay, yeah, thank you. I call for the vote.
Okay, I'll do a roll call, and it's on the motion to table.
It's on the motion to table.
R?
Yes.
R4, Mazie?
No.
Mazie, no. Schaefer?
Yes.
Schaefer, yes. Solt, no. Tyler? Tyler, abstain. White?
No.
White, no. Castro?
This motion to table fails, or this motion to table, there were two votes in favor. There are two votes in favor. There are 3 votes against the motion to table. So the motion fails. I will now call for the question. Now I abstain. So I call for the original question, which is to pay the $4,000 invoice.
Could I clarify for invoice number 37788?
Yes, for $4,000.
I'm sorry. Okay, so this is about paying this invoice. R?
No.
R, no. Mazie?
Yes.
Mazie, yes. Schaefer?
No.
Schaefer, no. Solt, no. Tyler?
Yes.
Tyler, yes. White?
Yes.
White, yes. Castro?
Yes,
Castro,
motion carries.
yes.
Seeing no business, no additional business before the council, is there a motion to adjourn?
I have another item that I'd like to bring up. It's in new items. Okay?
Were they here? What are you saying?
I said I have another item I'd like to discuss. You're right. Thank you. I'm sorry. I have another item I'd like to discuss, and it's not on the agenda.
And that item is?
I'd like to discuss something that occurred at a Public Safety Committee meeting where a parent alleged interference with her child's transport to school. I would like to discuss or mention at a Public Safety Committee meeting, there was a parent who alleged interference with her child's transport to school. I would like to be very clear that the council made no decisions on this matter, but I would like to urge the chairman to develop guidelines on the roles and responsibilities of the council, committee members, or chairs, and any other individuals purporting to speak for the village. And I'm presenting that in the form of a motion to help prevent problems in the future.
So the motion is to develop guidelines for committees in the future? Is that?
Shall I read it?
I heard it. Could you explain it? What are you trying to stop, or what are you trying to make happen?
I'm trying to make clear who has the authority to take actions or speak for the council on a variety of matters. To be clear, for example, can I go on my own testify before the county council? Can I go talk to Montgomery County Public School about an individual student? Can a committee member, make decisions on X, Y, and Z? It's broad-based. I think we work better when we understand what our roles and responsibilities are and stay within them across a range of, and I know I've had this is of course quite some time ago, a discussion with Mayor White about, on another matter, her concern that communication represented a message from the council. And we really have no guidelines now, or I think unclear understanding. So that is the rationale behind this. And I think we will be hearing more on this incident that many of us knew nothing about. So.
Yes, Councilmember Mazie.
What does voting on this motion mean? What are we being asked to do?
So here's the way I understand the motion that's been made. It is to develop guidelines for, guidance for committees and council members in the future regarding authority to speak for the council.
And who would be responsible for doing that? It would be a committee of some sort, or what?
In my motion or in general?
How would we, if I'm going to vote for this, what's the implementation process? Is there going to be a committee created? Is the mayor supposed to develop draft guidelines for us to consider? What's happening here?
Yes, Councilmember Solt.
My suggestion is that the chairman, perhaps the mayor, develop guidelines that we review and vote on. So we would have a say. But I think we need more clarity.
Yeah, it'd be my suggestion that perhaps we ask the mayor to develop a committee for this, to process this. And it seems to me that there may be, and there have been over the past 18 months or so, other items which would benefit from a committee process regarding how the council works, so that there are procedures established that everybody understands. I know I wasn't aware that this recommendation was coming forward, but I have heard from one council member or another that having procedures like this might be helpful to the council. So that's the way I understand the motion, that we ask the mayor to appoint, and I would see whether this is consistent with your recommendation.
No, you're changing my motion. I never said develop a committee.
You said
I said
somebody
have the chairman to develop guidelines on the roles and responsibilities of the council, committee members or chairs, and any individual purporting to speak for the village. That's what my language was.
And in your response to Councilmember Mezie's comments, what you said is, could be the chair, could be the mayor, could be somebody, and so that's why
I never said could be somebody, and I never suggested a committee.
I know. So would you, yes, Mayor White.
Martha, I think not having this in writing is very difficult at this late hour. I need to get up and go to work in the morning, and I don't think it's fair to the council to dive into this issue at the end of a very long monthly meeting. My recommendation would be to hold off until October.
There's been a motion, and there has been support for the motion. motion by Councilmember Salt and a second, I think, by Councilmember Schaefer. Did you support this?
I didn't, but I will.
Okay, so there's been support. We would be voting now on requesting the chairperson to develop guidelines. Let me have you restate your motion.
The chairperson to develop guidelines on the roles and responsibilities of the council, committee members or chairs, and any individual purporting to speak for the village. And I think there's an urgency to this, given recent events.
So does everybody understand what the motion is? Seeing no one, with any questions about the motion, I'll ask the secretary to call the roll.
Okay. R?
No.
R against? Maisy? No. Maisy against? Schaefer?
Yes.
Schaefer 4, Solt 4, Tyler? No. Against? White?
No.
Against? Pastrana?
Abstain, the motion fails. I think then that our meeting concludes. Motion to abstain? A motion to adjourn, thank
Yes.
you.
We're all out of
Yeah.
our seats anyway, so, okay.
All right, we are concluded at 10:03. Thank you all.